it will only work for a period of time before eventually someone will go, fuck this, I'm going to go buy my own fucking carrots.
Hello, 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 and welcome to Well Shit. It really is that simple. I'm Claire.
And I'm Serena. On this podcast, we help you to understand about your 12 universal needs, why they are currently not being well met,
how to meet them in ways that work for you, and how to consistently do so in quick, easy, and simple ways that fit seamlessly into your life.
We'll also help you to understand how doing so will have a positive ripple effect in literally every area of your life.
If you like what you hear, sign up for more support with meeting your needs with your weekly Universal Needs Notes at theuniversalneeds.com.
And enjoy the show.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, everyone.
So we are on to episode number 2 of our Shapes series. Today, we're going to get straight into the content because we've got a lot to cover today. And this one and the next one are ones that this episode and the next episode are going to be ones where people are going to recognize a lot of what we are talking about, but they're probably going to notice it a lot in other people, not necessarily as much in themselves. So this is going to be an opportunity for you to start to learn a little bit more about some of the behaviors that you're doing that maybe aren't working so well for you. And then in a couple of episodes time, we're going to get into how to shift this and how to do this in much more supportive ways for yourself and those around you. So we want to start off with just a quick reminder that we it's really important for us to recognize what ways of meeting our needs are disempowering and which ways of meeting our needs are empowering. And while we might have some idea about this goes way deeper than, I wasn't aware of half of this stuff before I started doing this work. And the more we understand it, the better we're going to be able to start shifting things in ways that are going to work well for us. So if you haven't listened to the first episode in this series, the victim approach that we did last time, please go back and listen to that first, because that is the basis for what we're talking about today. If you are recognizing the persecutor approach, it's because the victim approach comes first, as in that somebody is a victim approach before they are a persecutor approach. So this, without that, not so helpful. So go back and listen to that episode. But you still listening? I can see you. You still listening? Go back and listen to the other one first. Trust me, it's going to make way more sense if you come back and listen to this one second. So as we talked about in our last episode, just this quick reminder that Dr. Stephen Cartman came up with this model called the drama triangle. We're going to put it on the screen just right now so you can have a quick look at it. And in that drama triangle, there were 3 positions, which is the victim, persecutor, and rescuer. Now, when we talk about it, we go a lot deeper than the descriptions that Dr. Cartman came up with. And we talk about these positions as the victim approach, the persecutor approach, and rescuer approach, because what is being described is it's a set of behaviors that are related to how we are approaching a situation, not necessarily the objective reality of the situation. And the reason we do this is because we don't want to muddle up how we're approaching the situation and what is actually happening to us. Because when we do that, sometimes it can lead to victim blaming. It can cause problems with accountability and responsibility. And it doesn't provide an appropriate pathway to accounting. Not that anybody wants a good pathway to accounting. That's not true. There are some people who love accountants. My family, I've got a family of accountants. They love accounting. I personally do not want a good path to accounting.
I'm glad somebody does love accounting, because
right?
I'm with you.
it's not our wheelhouse. Definitely. So it does not provide an appropriate pathway to accountability, not accounting, accountability, healing, and justice in the instances where somebody has been objectively victimized. So remembering it's one of the things that really is important to remember is that all of these positions in this triangle, in the drama triangle, have chronically unmet needs. Either have unmet needs that have been unmet for a long period of time. They are a victim approach at the core. The core feeling is anxiety or anxiety related, and their focus is on their problems.
And while we are talking about the disempowering ways, we want to give a reminder when it comes to empowering ways to meet our needs. We tend to have an idea of the ways to meet our needs that are empowering, but there are also a lot of ways of meeting our needs that are empowering that we're not currently aware of. So to help us understand this better, we use the universal needs empowerment ecosystem, as this is almost always the root of the ways that we meet our needs that are empowering. So all the positions in the empowerment ecosystem exist with the context of community, local, extended, systematic, and global. The three positions in the empowerment ecosystem. I love how
Which
we
we're going
use
to put
words
on the
like
screen right now.
we keep using we use words that sound really good together, but when you read them, and it's like all like
It's a
trying
mouthful.
to get out all my E's at the same time. The three positions in the empowerment ecosystem are creator approach, supporter approach, and the contributor approach. All these positions in the empowerment ecosystem have constantly met needs. Our creator approach at core, the core feeling is want. What do they want more of? And their focus is on their outcomes. So in order to be able to move from a disempowering to empowering, we need to be able to identify where we are in the disempowering and know how to move to where we want to be, which is the empowering. This is why we first focus on the disempowering, so you can learn to spot these patterns both in yourself and in others. And then we'll cover the empowering, so you can learn more about how to move between the two.
So last time we talked about the victim approach in the drama triangle, which we're going to put on the screen again just now so you can see what it is we're talking about. Today, we're going to be talking about the persecutor approach. Now, persecutor approach behaviors are toxic and sometimes abusive behaviors that are rooted in first and foremost being in a victim approach. Now, it's important to say that the fact that these behaviors are at their root in a victim approach does not mean that these behaviors should be accepted or that the person shouldn't have to face consequences or that they shouldn't be held accountable. The person engaging in these behaviors, also being in the victim approach, doesn't mitigate, it doesn't minimize or change the impact to the person on the receiving end. Being in creator mode is how we figure out how to approach or deal with somebody who is exhibiting these behaviors. And we're going to get to that a little bit later. So we're going to get to that in a later episode when we're talking about the empowerment ecosystem. So what is the persecutor approach? Well, the persecutor approach are they're the perceived cause of the victim's problems. They can be real or perceived by the person who's in the victim approach. They are the perceived source of blame for all the victim's feelings. And the person in the victim approach takes the persecutor approach personally, whether it's personal or not. So the primary characteristics of someone who is in the persecutor approach, they try to take power from or have power over the victim. They're the perceived source of harm. That could be physical, mental, emotional, energetic, any kind of harm. They can be manipulative, attacking, or defensive. Now, it's important to say that the persecutor approach can be a person or a situation or a circumstance that's viewed as a persecutor to somebody who is in the victim approach. So if it's a person, they'll often dominate through attempts to blame, control, criticize, or oppress. They exert power over the victim. They want, consciously or unconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally, to take power from the victim, the person who's in the victim approach position, because at core, they are a victim approach themselves, so they feel powerless. So they're trying to take that power back, but in doing so, they're actually victimizing somebody else in the process. Their behavior can take the form of manipulation or defensiveness, among many, many others. They often see themselves as superior to the victim. That might be in knowledge, in their actions, behaviors, development, etc. And if it's conscious, as in if they're consciously doing the persecutor approach behaviors, they're perceiving the situations as win-lose. I have to win in order to if in order for me to win, somebody else has to lose. So I have to have the power in the situation. And if it's a circumstance or a situation, it's perceived that way by the victim. That's how the victim sees it. So the persecutor approach summary, at its core, it is a victim approach. So first and foremost, if you are engaging with persecutor approach behaviors, you also need to look at the victim approach, because that will be underneath the victim approach. Internally, they feel powerless. They try to take power from the victim, often by positioning as superior or by dominating, can be manipulative and defensive, trying to feel better about themselves and their position by taking the situation out on others. They become the persecutor approach to avoid being in the victim approach. The core feelings are anxiety or anxiety related. Ring any bells? Yes, that is the same as the victim approach. And sometimes they're a situation and but they're being viewed that way by the victim. And it's important to say here also that they are also focusing on the problems in the situation. So somebody who is in the persecutor approach also focuses on the problems the same way, because all of the positions in this, all of the positions in the drama triangle do that.
Mm-hmm. So what is important to know about the persecutor approach? When we talk about behavior taking the form of manipulation, it's important to realize that a lot of the victim approach behaviors are actually also persecutor approach behaviors, because they are behaviors that are being enacted in order to manipulate other people and their needs, which is a persecutor approach behavior. So I'm going to issue a trigger warning here. We are going to talk about abusive dynamics and behaviors. Most behaviors which are being enacted to try and get other people to meet needs for us, other than directly asking them, where they are able to say no without any negative consequences to them, are a form of manipulation, which also makes them a persecutor approach behavior. A lot of the time, the reason we engage in these manipulations is because we don't feel comfortable directly asking for help or support, because we don't feel worthy of the help or support due to an unmet value need. So we engage in forms of manipulation, consciously and unconsciously, to get our needs met without the risk of the request being rejected. The issue with this is the fact that we are engaging in the manipulation negatively impacts the needs of others, their value need, and their personal power need, which, due to our interconnectedness, actually negatively impacts our own needs as well.
So another important thing is that the persecutor approach behaviors do not have to be intended to be real or harmful. Someone does not need to be meaning to do these things in order to be doing them, or for the behaviors to be doing harm to others. So what are some of the ways that the persecutor approach manifests? As we go through these examples, like with the victim approach behaviors, notice which ones you recognize or that resonate with your past behavior patterns. And also notice where you can start to say, hold on a second, this is something I can see in this person or that person, or this is something I can see in this character from this TV show or this movie. And then whenever you notice them in others, make sure that you're actually looking at it and reflecting, where are the ways that I do this kind of thing? And it may not be exactly the same as what this other person is doing, but the approach is likely to be, could be similar, even if it's maybe in smaller ways. So first one is mistreating or bullying. So putting someone else down or treating them badly to feel better about ourselves, which is red way of trying to meet our value need, to try to meet our own feeling of inadequacy. So it's a way of masking. Gaslighting, we talked about this a little bit in the victim approach episode. This is about behaving in ways to question, invalidate, downplay, and undermine other people's thoughts, feelings, and view of reality as a form of manipulation or control, which is, again, a red way of trying to meet our value and personal power needs. If you have not watched the movie Gaslight, which is where this term comes from, I highly recommend watching it. It's an older movie, and I'm not really a kind of older classic movie. I mean, it's an older movie for me. I was very offended over the holiday period when I brought up a movie that was, I can't even remember which one it was. It was like from the 2000s, and my niece turned around and went, "Oh, it's an old movie." Old movie. It's in color for
Back
a start.
to the silent pictures there, huh?
Right, exactly. It's, I think it was from the 40s, I think maybe 40s or 50s.
Mm-hmm.
It's around there. I believe it's a black and white movie, and that normally isn't something I'm a particular fan of, but to actually watch it and to see the behaviors in the movie and how they play out. And you can then see, oh, this is the basis for this term that is used so frequently. And it's really important to get clear on, we're doing things that are done to basically have someone question their knowledge of what is happening or their feelings, as opposed to just, oh, I said, I disagree with you. That's not gaslighting. Gaslighting is, I'm going to say and do things to try to make you change what you know to be true, or to undermine it, or have you question whether it's true or not.
Questioning your reality, basically.
Yeah. It's if you didn't hear me in the last episode, I talked about an example where I heard a girl who was on the phone to her abusive ex-boyfriend, and I gave it a little bit of an example in that. That's an example of what actual gaslighting is. It's like acting in such a way that has someone like questioning themselves and being like, oh, maybe I don't, maybe that isn't true, maybe that didn't happen, maybe that's not what I'm feeling. So it's really important for us to be clear on this. Superiority is another way this happens. So positioning ourselves as, or behaving as if we are superior to others to try to meet our needs, or to try to mask an unmet value need. It's like, if I'm not feeling good about myself, I'm not feeling good enough, I might try and perform this superiority to try to make myself feel better about myself. Doesn't work, by the way. Really crappy strategy, just saying. Another example of this is the victim defense. So it's often using this perception of victimhood, not necessarily the reality, to try to shield ourselves from the accountability when we are being when we're doing persecutor approach behaviors. So what we're trying to do here is, it's like we're trying to go, oh no, look, I'm the victim, and using that as a way of going, like, I did this thing over here. Let's not look at that. Let's look at over here where I'm the victim and I can get someone to feel bad for me and try to meet my needs for me. Manipulating other people's behavior, consciously or unconsciously, as in like we're aware we're doing it or we're not aware we're doing it, we're intending to or we're not intending to, through using their unmet needs to try to get them to meet our needs. This happens so much, where it's like, I'm going to try and use your unmet needs to try to get you to meet my needs. And this happens a lot in the early stages of toxic and abusive relationships. And some of these, you'll notice that some of these other things further down are versions of manipulation. Like they're because manipulating, that's a very, very broad category. Important for us to put it in here though, because we can't name every single version of manipulation. We have other things to do in our lives. It would take a lot of time to do that.
Like, I'm wondering this, I'm coming from left field here. I feel like there's kind of a theme in the victim approach, which is a lot of masking. Like, masking is something that comes up a lot. And then in the persecutor approach, manipulation comes up a lot as like the different forms. And I know that they can be utilized interchangeably within them, and everything comes in that the drama triangle comes from that victim approach space. Yeah, but do you think there's a separation there with that?
Not
really.
A separation there. Yeah, I
that's
think
why I said
two different things. Yeah, they're two different things. So manipulation, because a lot of the victim behaviors are also a form of manipulation. So one is what you're doing, two is the reason you are doing it. So yes, a lot of the persecutor behaviors are manipulating behaviors. In the victim approach, a lot of the behaviors are done to try to mask our unmet needs rather than meet our unmet needs. But one is what I'm trying to achieve, which is masking my unmet needs. One is what I'm doing. And I actually think there's a lot of manipulation in all of these. And I think there's a lot of masking in all of these. So it's important to recognize that sometimes we're doing these as things we're trying to do to meet our needs. We're just using really shitty strategies to do it. Some of the times we're doing it to try to stop ourselves from feeling the fact that our needs are unmet, which is masking. So yes, I can see how a lot of the time it feels like it's more about masking, but I think that's more because of the focus of the behavior. Like, because one behavior is happening, oh, we have a special guest. Hey Daz, Serena's cat's decided to come join and make his presence known on the podcast.
He gives me zero time of day. Like, I'm not secondary human. There's two of us in here with him. I am like I'm just the feeder of the cat at this point. So the fact that he like got on my lap, he wants to go outside and play.
Is this persecutor approach behavior? Is he trying to manipulate you into meeting his needs?
Well, now he's pretending that I don't feed him, and he's over at the food bowl eating, and then just looking like I'm not happy with these dry things. So I see you, persecutor. Stay over there.
Persecutor approach behavior, not necessarily a persecutor. Yes. So I think that the thing is that because so often when we're talking about the persecutor approach, we're focusing on how they are harming somebody else and how their behaviors are intentionally or unintentionally harming somebody else. And that's the reason we get focused on the manipulation here. And that's the reason that if we're enacting victim behaviors to try to manipulate somebody else, we start in the victim. And then the second it's about manipulating somebody else, we're actually in a persecutor approach, even though we might be enacting a victim approach. This is where all of this starts to get like, you'll start to notice that ding, 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 ding. Oh, I'm like, victim approach, rescue approach, persecutor approach. Oh, no, back to victim approach. Oh, no, back to persecutor approach. Like, literally, it can be that quick.
And as you're saying it, like, I'm glad I went to left field to grab that one, because it's true. Like, as I'm looking, I'm like, oh yeah, and the masking, people usually people aren't in the persecutor approach unless they're coming from the core of victim approach. If they were in the empowerment ecosystem, like if they were in that other shape, they wouldn't need to, they wouldn't be trying to mask, they're manipulating to also mask because they don't want to.
being in persecutor approach is a form of masking, because sometimes people are going into persecutor approach to avoid feeling the fact that they're in the victim approach, which is a form of masking. So it's like, yes, and yes across the board with all of the things. I think it's the answer I'm giving.
So if it wasn't a lot already, here you go.
Yes, exactly. And that's the reason that we've taken so long to go through this and put this content together, because so often we want to make sure that we're explaining this as best we can in the ways that will have you understanding it, because there is so much nuance to this, and there are so many layers of like, this is the victim approach, but then it's the persecutor approach, and then hold on a second, we switch to the rescue approach, but underneath we're still the victim approach, but now we're trying to, there's so many layers to this. So that's the reason that we kind of are coming at this the way that we are, which is a little different to our usual episodes. So next example is one-upping. So trying to outdo other people to try to meet our value need or personal power need in red ways. Love bombing. Big red flashing warning signs if you notice this. So love bombing tends to happen a lot at the beginning of toxic or abusive relationships. That can be on a one-to-one basis, and it can be in a group situation as well. Love bombing is extreme displays of affection and attention to others to try to manipulate them or try to get them to meet our needs. I said it's a very common behavior in abusive dynamics. So what happens is it's like as we talked about in previous episodes, it's actually a form of like love bombing is actually really needs bombing. It's like, I'm going to try and meet your needs so much that you're going to want me, you're going to love me, you're going to become dependent on me, and then I'm going to have a form of control over you. And again, could be intentional, could be unintentional, could be aware of it, may not be aware of it. It's still a problematic behavior pattern. Power grabbing is the next one. So someone who tries to have or wields power over others to mask their own feeling of victimhood or inadequacy, or as a red way of trying to meet their personal power needs. It's like, I'm going to try and grab the power in the situation because I believe that there's only a certain amount of it, and I want to have it. You have to not have it, because I don't really understand what power is, because power doesn't really work like that. But within a lot of our social systems, we act like it does, which means that it seems to. It's very confusing. But basically, if you're doing that, you're probably engaging in a persecutor approach behavior. Next is shaming. So behaving in a way to try to cultivate shame in the person in the victim approach position as a way of manipulating, controlling, or positioning them as less than, which tends to be a red way of trying to meet our value and personal power need. Positioning priority, so positioning us or our needs as more important than others, and being willing to sacrifice the needs of others to try to get our needs met. Withdrawing, so withdrawing communication, connection, and affection as a form of punishment for behavior that we don't like, or as a way of avoiding accountability. So you notice this is also a behavior that showed up in the victim approach. And as we said at that point, this is a lot of the time, it actually falls into the persecutor approach behavior. Like if we're withdrawing without really affecting other people too much, then that's more victim approach. If we're doing it and we are negatively impacting other people by the fact that we are doing, we tend to be in the persecutor approach behavior. Emotional withholding. So this is about withholding emotions, refusing to be vulnerable, open, or to communicate about your own emotional needs or emotional experience. That's again another form of persecutor approach. It's like, I'm going to try to protect my needs at the cost of the relationship needs and at the cost of the impact it's going to have on you. So a lot of the time this might happen where it's like, if you're in a relationship where one person is being vulnerable, and because this is sometimes how this plays out, is that person in the persecutor approach asks the other person to share how they're feeling. So this person is now feeling vulnerable because they've shared, and then the person who's in persecutor approach does the emotional withholding. And that's where this person now is like, oh, I've shared how I feel, but I know nothing about how the other person feels. I don't know, and it creates this really icky, toxic dynamic between the two. Projective blaming is our next one. So that's blaming someone else for something that is our responsibility as a way of trying to avoid accountability or to avoid feeling the impact of our needs of making a mistake or negatively impacting somebody else's needs. The next one is know-it-alling. So this is about trying to appear more knowledgeable than others as an attempt to mask or meet our needs, especially our value needs. Like, look at me, how much I know, therefore I must be important, I must be valuable. And you're basically positioning yourself as superior to others to try to get your needs met or to mask your unmet needs. Defective blaming deflective blaming. There is a very big difference between defective blaming and deflective blaming. It's tough to say 3 times fast, I can tell you that much. It's tough to say once at regular speed, apparently. So deflective blaming is when held accountable for poor behavior, deflecting the blame onto someone else when it's our responsibility to try to avoid accountability or to avoid feeling the impact to our needs of making a mistake or negatively impacting somebody else's needs. Now, at this point, you might start to go, oh, isn't that Darvo? We're going to get to Darvo a little bit later on, because Darvo requires, there are some other steps to it that make it this. This is just about that deflective blaming, which is like the first part of the of Darvo, and there are subtleties in this, like it's very, if you don't know what Darvo is an abusive behavior dynamic, which we're going to literally cover a little bit further down. And the reason that we're putting these in here is because we don't want someone to go, oh, I didn't do this piece of that one, and therefore I'm not doing Darvo, therefore I'm not in Persecutor Approach. Not so fast. There may be a way in which you are in Persecutor Approach, and we want to make sure that we're covering all the bases as far as that's concerned. Fault finding, this is about finding fault with the other person to make ourselves feel better than them, to manipulate or control them, or to put them down to position them as being quote unquote sort of worse than us, as a red way of trying to meet our value or personal power needs. This is often done over time to create this stockpile of fault, where it's like all of us, like, you keep piling on and piling on and piling on in order to position ourselves as superior, and the other person is like as really less than. The next one is donkey and carroting. So holding the position of something, holding the promise of something that will never be received as a way of trying to control or manipulate the person in the victim approach position to try to get them to meet our needs, or as a red way of trying to meet our personal power need. So when we talk about donkey and carroting, what we're imagining, and I just want to make sure everyone's got the visual in their mind. If you imagine you're riding on the back of a donkey and you've got like a fishing rod that is that you're holding like in front of the donkey, that's dangling a carrot that is just out of the donkey's reach. And what happens is the donkey will keep moving forward to try to get to the carrot, but because you're on the back of the donkey and you're the one holding the carrot, every time the donkey moves forward, the carrot also moves forward, which means that the donkey will never get to it. So this is about this, like, it's like holding this in and going, look, see, it's here, just a little bit further, just keep coming in this direction, and it can be yours, but you constantly move it away so that the other person can never get it. So what it will often do is it will mean that other people, that the person in the victim approach, they'll keep coming back because they're like, but look, the thing I want is right there, and they're never able to get it because of how you are approaching the situation. This reminds me very much of a story. I was an expert on a documentary about marriage many years ago, and I've shared the story on another podcast episode, where there was a person who was basically sharing about the art of pickup, and which vomit. It's like how do you, the art of pickup really was what they were basically saying is, how do you manipulate somebody's needs into making them want you, is basically what they were saying. And the guy explained what it was, and the interviewer like tried to paraphrase it to try and say, okay, is this what you're saying? And what he said was, so what I hear you're saying is that you want the other person to know that you know their needs, and you've got the ability to meet them, and then meet them, and that's how they want to be with you. And the pickup artist, teacher, I use the term very loose, very loosely, said, no, you let them know you know what their needs are, that you have the ability to meet them, and then you don't meet them. Because the second that you meet them, in his eyes, you lose all appeal. And the truth of the matter is, that's just manipulation of somebody's needs. This is the donkey and carroting thing. And it will only work for a period of time before eventually someone will go, fuck this, I'm going to go buy my own fucking carrots. And but it happens so frequently. It happens in toxic and abusive groups. It happens in toxic and abusive relationships. And it is very, very damaging, very, very dangerous. The cool thing is, if you know how to meet your own needs, you got a pocket full of carrots. It doesn't matter what somebody dangles in front of your face. You can be like, fuck your carrot, I got my own. Da, da, da. So and that's one of the things that will help, and that's it's interestingly enough, like that's by meeting your own needs is how you'll start to move out of the drama triangle. Spoiler alert. But we're going to get to more of that a little bit later. It's a little bit more involved than that. So the next option is next version of this is defensive deception. So lying to someone to avoid us facing the consequences of them knowing the truth. It's like, oh, well, if they know this, then they might think I'm a shitty person because I did a shitty thing. And if they know that I did a shitty thing, then I'm going to have to face the consequences about it. So I'm going to lie to them so I don't have to face the consequences of it, basically, is what we're talking about. That's a version of how that shows up. Controlling. We talked about this in the victim approach. This is about, as we talked about, the way it shows up in the persecutor approach is when we're trying to control other people around us as a way of trying to meet our needs or mask the feelings of our unmet needs. And I can see people going, well, how does controlling other people mask our own unmet needs? Because sometimes when we control other people, we feel more powerful. So that's a way of us trying to mask a feeling of maybe powerlessness or unworthiness within our. It's like, if I feel powerful enough, maybe that'll make up for the fact that my value need isn't well met. Maybe if I feel powerful enough, that'll make up for the fact that I don't feel very safe and secure. Maybe I don't feel loved. Maybe I don't have a good well met emotional expression need, for example. False blaming is the next one. Blaming the other person for things that are either not their fault or untrue to make ourselves feel better than them, or to manipulate or control them, or to put them down to a position of being kind of worse than us, to try to avoid accountability, to avoid feeling the impact to our needs of making a mistake or negatively impacting somebody else's needs, or as a red way of trying to meet our value or personal power needs. The next is abusive behavior patterns. So any pattern of abuse is the persecutor approach, including mental, emotional, physical, sexual, financial abuse. Any form of abuse dynamic is going to be somebody who is coming from the persecutor approach. That doesn't mean to say that because this is an approach that they're not actually abusing somebody. As we talked about previously, there is a difference between being an objective victim and taking a victim approach to something. There is so it's important for us to recognize that this is when we're talking about abusive behavior patterns, somebody is an actual victim, and how they are approaching dealing with being a victim may be based in the victim approach and maybe linked to the persecutor approach, because that's what we've learned in our society, and we haven't yet learned that there are other ways of dealing with it which are more constructive and more supportive. And the next one is weaponizing competence. We talked about this in the last episode. This is such a huge thing. And so this is about focusing on their own ignorance about how to do a task while making no effort to learn or figure out how to do it, when there are plenty of resources for them to be able to figure it out. Feigning ignorance about how to do a task, as in like maybe is saying like, oh, I don't know, when you do know, you're just pretending that you don't, or how to figure out how to do it, putting no effort into doing a task well, or intentionally doing a task badly to avoid being expected or asked to do it or similar tasks again in the future. This performance, whether it's conscious or unconscious, whether you're aware that you're doing it or unaware that you're doing it, whether you're intending to do it, whether you're not intending to do it, of incompetence, it forces other people to have to do tasks that you yourself are more than capable of doing or learning to do. And in doing so, it puts more work on the other person, usually when they're already doing the majority of the labor. And that might be visible labor, i.e. they're doing the physical tasks, or it may be that they're doing the mental labor in the relationship. So like noticing when something needs to be done, or planning things, or figuring out things that need to be done and ensuring that they're going to get done. I saw a video, I think it was yesterday, which I was, you know how Serena sometimes says she gets a little punchy. I was getting a little punchy watching this video, and it said that moment when you've asked your boyfriend to start the painting, and you come into this, and this woman, it was a white room. It had like a white we call it skirting board. What's the thing that you have around the bottom of walls, like the wooden,
like a baseboard or a runner
baseboard?
board.
That's it. Yes, I knew there was a different term for it over here. Those were all white, and it was this dark blue or like a deep blue color. The blue was patchy, and there was dribbles of it all over the electrical, like the plug sockets, all over the baseboards and the skirting board, dribbled over the floor. It was just it was a living representation of weaponized incompetence. And interestingly enough, like scroll down to the comments, people were like, I hate weaponized incompetence. And it was very obvious. And the people were like, this is weaponized incompetence. Like, and the person whose video it was, it's like, it's his room. He gets to live with the consequences of it. Like, I'm just going to shut the door. And I'm like, okay, fair play to you. And a lot of the time that happens when other people are going to face the consequences of it, not just the individual in question. but it is such a big part of so many relationships, including family relationships, including friendships, including work relationships. Such a big deal, and so crappy for everybody involved.
And it puts a lot of emotional and mental labor on the other person in the relationship when people do this approach, because like, I mean, Claire just talking about it, yeah, I got punchy hearing about it. I'm like, oh, you like, common sense, like all of those things. And then, like, luckily she was able to be like, no, it's their problem, their room, they get to deal with it. Most times, like, the other person has to deal with it more than closing a door.
Right, absolutely. And the thing about it is that I can see people going, oh, well, he didn't mean to do that. He also didn't mean not to do that. Like,
yeah,
there's a difference between, oh, I didn't mean to drop paint down there, and I didn't want to drop paint down there, so I'm going to mask and tape off the areas that I don't want to get paint on, because that's the way of ensuring that paint doesn't get there. And that's the thing, is a lot of the time, like, whether you intended to do it or not seems to be a factor people think is really important and relevant here. And it's like, the only thing that matters is you intending not to do it and figuring out ways of preventing it from happening.
And if it happens, then figuring out ways to stop it from continuing to happen. Like,
and rectifying the fact that it happened. Like, what do you do about, okay, now we've got paint on the baseboard. Now, how do I go and get the paint off the baseboard? And do I now need to repaint the baseboard in order that it's not covered in dribbles of blue paint? Honestly, I got so heated watching it. I'm like, swipe.
Yeah, OCD brain is having a little bit of a moment with that one.
Yes.
So we're going to move on to the next one. Reactive projective blaming. So from the persecutor approach position, reactively projecting blame onto the person in the victim approach position as a means to position yourself as the victim and them as the persecutor in order to avoid accountability and feel better about yourself and get your needs met from others. We see this often in relationships. It's like that flip, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I was in a different position a minute ago.
And again, this is very similar to the Darvo thing, which we're about to come on to in a minute. And I said, there are subtleties in it, which is the reason we put both in here, in order to ensure that someone doesn't go, oh, well, I didn't attack the other person, so therefore I'm not doing that. But you did do this.
Yes, and next one is isolating. Trying to isolate the victim of abuse from other people in their lives so as not to be held accountable by others for their poor behaviors. Now, to the often mentioned Darvo, which is deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. So this comes from the persecutor approach. This is the Darvo. And again, I'm going to elongate the letters: deny, attack, reverse the victim, and the offender. The Darvo strategy that is used in the abusive, this is the Darvo strategy used in abusive dynamics. So this is where the abuser denies the abuse, attacks the victim's credibility, character, or motives, for example, through gaslighting, manipulation, insulting, or threatening them, and then tries to switch the roles, attempting to portray themselves as the victim and making the victim look like the offender.
And there are a lot of things that are very similar to this. And I said, there are subtle differences. And if somebody is engaging in Darvo-like behavior, chances are they're going to be like, oh, no, but this bit isn't there, so it can't be that. Which is the reason that we've put so many different variations of these in, to ensure that, okay, maybe you haven't done this element of the Darvo, but in actual fact, you've done this, this, and this is still part of the persecutor approach behaviors. And interestingly enough, from my own personal experience, I like, every time Darvo came up, I'm like, there's something that is, it's similar, but it's not quite the same thing. And it's something I have experienced over and over and over and over and over again. And this is weaponized, self-absorbed victimhood. So what happens when someone is engaging in weaponized, self-absorbed victimhood is they dive or collapse into extreme victimhood endlessly to avoid all accountability. It's this like seeming endless, like dive into a black hole of extreme victimhood. So every time somebody names their poor behavior or holds them accountable, they plunge back or further into their self-indulgent victimhood. They're fixating solely on their own feelings and disregarding anything and anyone else. Any attempt to name or address the needs of others get ignored, and they respond by pulling the focus back onto themselves, their intentions, their feelings, their needs. The black hole of self-absorbed victimhood becomes this weapon that leaves no space, attention, or resources for anyone else's feelings, experience, or needs. I.e., it's another form of control and domination. It's using, and this thing, people don't see it as a means of control and domination, because if someone's in this like black hole of victimhood, it's like, well, how can they be controlling? Oh, this is a very, very effective means of control and domination, because of the effect it has on everyone around it. It often stops others are holding them accountable for their actions and behaviors, because people are like, oh, well, no, but look, they're already feel so bad. They're already in this like really bad space. I don't want to hold them accountable further, because it's just going to make things worse. And it means that those who are affected by their actions then get further harmed by having to deal with their weaponized self-absorbed victimhood, in addition to dealing with the impact they've already had on them. So this, as I said, is very similar to Darvo, but instead of attacking the victim, they control the situation and other people involved by performing an extreme self-absorbed version of victimhood, which pulls all the attention and resources in the space and manipulates everyone around into continually focusing on them and their needs, when they were and still are the person in the persecutor approach.
And something I think that's important to mention with this weaponized self-absorption victimhood is the like hole that they dive into doesn't oftentimes it is in relation to whatever the topic is at the time, whatever mirror's been put up to them. However, I've seen things come in from like people's past, like any sort of victimhood that they can use in that moment to kind of change the focus to go back onto them. Like, when we first kind of went through this, it was very easy for me to see when it was like situational. It's like, oh, yeah, they're in this situation and it's about this situation. But when somebody would come in with something that had nothing to do with it, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, I feel bad for them now. Like now it took me a while to realize it doesn't, like, this aspect doesn't necessarily have to be, or really any of them. Like, people will pull in these things at from anywhere that they can to preserve themselves from feeling like the victim, from being seen as the bad person, or having to deal with the accountability of their actions.
Right. And this is often, it's an avoidance. It's a way of avoiding accountability for their actions. And it's amazing how things, you're right, that there's this segue that happens sometimes, which is like, oh God, I can't do anything wrong. I'm such a terrible person. Remember this time, I remember the time in 1982 when I did it, and you're like, what the fuck are we talking about that now? This was about how you just like ran over my foot and it's broken now. How are we talking about what happened in 1980? And it's like they will literally pull anything, and it is really like the image of a black hole is a great example, because it just sucks everything into it. Like, nothing can exist around it. And this person is not only like, oh, someone holding me accountable, black hole. Like, it's like they're throwing the black hole into the space to pull everything into it. So the accountability falls into it as well. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. But it's like, oh, hold on a second. There's still other things. Let's make that black hole bigger. Like, it's so enormous that there's no space for any, like, everything gets sucked into it. Like, all the air in the room gets sucked into it. All the energy in the room gets sucked into it. And it's so draining to be in the presence of. And it really takes someone who understands what is going on in front of them to be able to like halt this process and go, hold on a second. This is not about you right now. And you are making it about you. And I've been in these conversations where every single time it's like black hole. And I'm like, hello, let's put a lid on that black hole. This is about you and the things that you have done. Black hole. No, sorry, lid on the black hole. We're not going into the black hole right now, because it's so important for you to recognize you are the one who's done harm in this situation. And that me, the person who is in front of you, is the person who's actually been victimized by your behavior, and you're still doing it in this moment. And it's really difficult to get to that space, and being like having your needs well met and understanding these dynamics is really helpful to that. And obviously we're also going to get into the how do you move into the empowerment dynamic a little bit later.
Before then, we still have a couple more for our persecutor approach.
Just one or two.
Just a few. Humanity manipulation, which is often mislabeled as guilt tripping. So this is appearing to use guilt to make the victim feel bad about a situation that was not their responsibility. So, for example, you made me sad, angry when they were just no longer meeting our needs. You know, that we get into the habit as humans of meeting other people's needs for them. And when you realize that you've been doing this and you stop, or even if you don't realize you've been doing this and just stop, people they tend to have feelings. And not saying the feelings about the way they're feeling about their needs no longer getting met aren't valid, but the approach
the feelings,
of being like,
the feelings about the fact that their needs are unmet are valid. The feelings about why their needs are unmet are not.
Yes. Thank you. You saw that. I was like trying to catch
Yes.
that. Like, where is
I could see you being like, there's something in here and I'm not entirely sure how to word it.
So guilt is basically our humanity kicking in, because what we actually did. Let's try that again. Guilt is our humanity kicking in because we actually did something that negatively impacted someone's needs or the needs ecosystem as a whole. And due to our interconnectedness and our humanity caused us to feel bad about that. So if we did not do anything that negatively impacted somebody's needs or the needs ecosystem, then we have nothing to feel guilty about. An attempt to make us feel guilty as a strategy to get us to meet their needs for them is someone manipulating our humanity, which is a persecutor approach behavior.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is caring. And this is a sense of entitlement, an unmet value need combined with a toxic attempt to meet a personal power need through a false belief in one's own superiority. It's weaponized against others as a red attempt to meet our own needs, or it creates a false perception of victimhood because the belief is that we are entitled to have what we want, how we want it, and if we don't get it, we believe we are being victimized, which is then weaponized against others. We do want to make a quick note about the term Karen, because this is a term that was originally coined to label white women enacting these behavior in a racial context. It has since been co-opted to any woman, and sometimes people who do not identify as women, who behaves poorly or who enacts these behaviors. It's important to acknowledge the origin of this term and how it's been co-opted and its meaning diluted because of its more generic use now, and how this generalization of a term that was created for a very specific reason makes it harder to call out the specific behavior that it was created to address, as the term has begun to take on a new meaning.
And that's the reason that I can see people going, well, why would you use it then? And the reason is because in the current in our current social system, this term Karen is being used in a very specific way now, and it was created for a specific term, but it's that meaning has been changed, and that's the reason that we've still used it, even though it's in that kind of diluted form, because it's a term that people recognize. People understand what you mean when you say someone's behaving like a Karen. But the problem is that meaning has changed from where it used to be. So it's really important for us to recognize the origin and the roots of that, because people, so that we can also start to still call out the behaviors that it was originally put in place to name, i.e. white women behaving crappily in a racial context. Being racist, basically, is the reason. And so it's really important for us to name that as where the origins were, and also ensure that what we're sharing here is relevant to how the term is being used currently.
The next one we have is powder kegging. And this is somebody who's consistently volatile so that other people will meet their needs as a way to avoid them blowing up. And this is a common persecutor behavior in abusive dynamics. Weaponizing victimhood is using perceived victimhood to justify poor behavior towards others as a red attempt to meet our needs. Defensive weaponization from the persecutor approach is using defensiveness to frame the other person as the persecutor in order to paint ourselves as the victim. So in order to avoid accountability and to feel better about ourselves. This is another red attempt to meet our needs. Proactive projective blaming. So from the persecutor approach, proactively projecting blame onto the other person as a means of to position ourselves as the victim. and them as the persecutor in order to avoid accountability and to feel better about ourselves. Again, another red way attempt to meet our needs or to try and get our needs met from others. So some of these are really similar in nature, but there are very subtle differences that could cause people to question or deny that they are actually being enacted. This is why we have spelled out each version here so that people cannot use these definitions to avoid accountability or the need for change. As we said, it's very nuanced. There's some crossover, and it's very important that each of these are recognized as their own individual action, as well as the combination that can create a real clusterfuck of drama triangle.
Right.
Remembering that all of the
just very briefly before we move on, one of the things I want to say here is that it's uncomfortable to name that we are engaging in persecuted behaviors. Like, we don't want to see ourselves in this light. We don't want to see our behaviors and go, oh crap, yeah, that was me, oh sorry, yeah, I need to do something about that now. And so what will happen is, remember, our brains are very, very clever. They will try everything possible to try to avoid us feeling bad about ourselves, even when feeling bad about ourselves is sometimes necessary in order for us to move in the direction that we want to move in and to improve and have things go in the direction that we want to create for ourselves in the future. And that's the part of the reason that we've added all this in, because our brains will jump in on and go, well, yeah, I didn't really do that. It's not quite that. Oh yeah, no, it's not really that, as a way of trying to go like, nope, it's like deflection central. It's like ding, 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 ding. Nope, can't make me. No, I can't. No persecutor approach here. No. Like, and the truth of the matter is that it doesn't serve us to do that. Like, although in the short term, it can preserve this kind of identity that we have about ourselves. And the illusion of that identity is the thing that makes us feel good about ourselves, i.e. it's trying to support our needs by believing that we are a good person who would never do any of these things. Like, we see ourselves in a way where it's like, hold on a second, no, I would never do that. That is not something I would ever do. That is not a behavior I would ever enact. And the truth of the matter is that doesn't help us. It's a short-term strategy for trying to avoid accountability and protect ourselves from the impact to our needs of recognizing that we're actually not as good as we maybe want to believe that we are, and that we do things that maybe harm others. And it's only through being able to see that and name it and acknowledge it and own it that we can go, I can see this is something I've been doing, and therefore I can now do something about it. If we can't name it, if we can't own it, we can't do something about it. And that's part of the reason there are so many of these that are pretty much the same thing, but depending on how you view what's being done, it could be very easy to kind of snake your way out of it and go, oh, no, not me. I'm shimmying out to the left. I'm shimmying out to the right. No, you can't hit me with your persecutor approach labels. And the truth of the matter is, it's only through owning it that things are going to get better for us.
And I want to say on the flip side of that too, like, I mean, this could be true of all of the positions in the drama triangle. We don't want the people in our lives to be in the persecutor approach. And it's hard when we're looking at something that's happening to us, or even more so if you're on the outside looking at something that's happening to somebody close. And there have been multiple situations where I've, talked about this kind of approach with people going through, especially like a breakup type of situation. And I'll call out a behavior and they're like, oh no, well, no, that's not what they're doing, or they love me, or, they don't want to believe that that is what the person's doing. And as avoiding this in a personal sense doesn't take you out of the persecutor approach. You're still there, whether you're pretending to be or not, or whether you're pretending not to be or are actually acknowledging the fact that you're there. But it's just really, really important to remember, like, the only way to change these dynamics, to change these approaches, is to acknowledge them and to work to fix them. So if you don't want to believe that your friend or your significant other or your boss or whoever it may be could be acting in these ways, because if you are the victim to a persecutor approach, there's some feels that go along with that.
Absolutely.
And to know that somebody has been doing this consciously or unconsciously, that needs to be acknowledged and addressed to repair the relationship, because these will cause fractures within the relationship, but also to like make the relationship one worth having. Like, you don't, if you, and correct me if
But you
I'm wrong,
kind of,
if
yeah,
you kind of fall into these approaches, you tend to get stuck in pinging around the specific triangle, rather than moving to another shape that can help you, your relationships, everything become better.
Right. Well, I mean, if you're engaging in these behaviors and you're not naming them either in yourself or somebody else, then you're going to stay in a toxic dynamic. You're going to stay in a dynamic which is disempowering and will not serve you in the long term. And it's like, if you there's the difficulty in naming it yourself and being like, I don't really want to admit that that's where I'm at, and if I, by doing that, I can actually start to do something to change it. The interesting thing is, if you don't name, if it's not safe for you to be able to name when somebody else is doing things that are not okay, and have them respond in a way that's, oh my goodness, thank you for letting me know, I really appreciate you telling me, I want to learn how to do better in the future, then that's not a supportive relationship for you anyway. There's a couple of things that are kind of in my head right now regarding this. So it's like, the first thing is that I saw a video, I think it was this morning, and I nearly commented on it, and I was like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. It's going to open up a whole can of worms, and I'm just not in the space where I want to deal with it. It was a guy who was saying that political correctness had gone too far, and how he was a progressive person, and he wanted, it's like, he was like, every time he says anything, people are calling him out for doing this and that and the other. And I'm like, what if, rather than seeing it as a criticism for something that you're doing wrong, because I mean, I didn't, even the comment I was going to respond with wasn't going to say quite this, but your ego is talking right now because you want to be seen as perfect, or you want to be perfect. And rather than seeing it as a criticism because you're not behaving perfectly, instead you could see it as somebody helping you to learn how to be an even better person. Like, same thing, you could say, hey, you did this thing and that's not okay. And one way of looking at it is this, oh God, like I can never do anything right. I mean, hello, persecutor approach behavior, go and have a little look. It shows up in a number. And that's basically what he was saying, is like, if I get called out, can you imagine if somebody who isn't interested in learning? And I'm like, oh, you're not as open to learning as you think you are, my friend. Because if you were, you'd be grateful every time. If you're somebody who wants to learn and someone comes along and points out things that you don't know, you're grateful for that. Like, thank you so much for letting me know. I really appreciate that about you. And so I think that this is one of those situations, by it's only through actually naming what's going on. Like, and this is a good example where somebody is like saying, I'm a person that wants to learn, but when they're actually given the information, like, here's something you obviously don't know that you need to learn, they get, oh, see, it's gone too far. No, that's, people are helping you learn. Like, they're taking time and energy to help you to learn how to do better. The fact that you can't see it as them helping you is a you problem, not a them problem. And it's not a, we've gone too far with political correctness. It's like, thank you for letting me know. Like, if somebody was like, I mean, like, thank you, I didn't know that. I really appreciate you telling me, da, 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 da. The other example that comes to mind is a conversation that Serena and I were having before we started recording this morning that links to The Handmaid's Tale. Now, like, spoiler alert, I may mention some things. If you haven't seen the final season, it's like, skip ahead. We'll put we'll make a note of the time code in the show notes as to like the point where we're going to stop talking about this, so you can finish off the end of the episode. But one of the things, like as Serena said, that sometimes it's really hard to see the persecutor approach in somebody when you have invested in believing that they are a certain kind of person, and then all of a sudden the behaviors change and you see that that's not actually who they are. And if you have seen the last final season, then I'm talking about Nick. So this is somebody who at one point he's been a love interest throughout the show. He's somebody who at one point seemed to be like a safer space for one of the main characters, June, to like in a horrific situation, there was some joy and there was some lightness and there was some connection. And the truth of the matter is that as the seasons have gone on, you've seen that he's not this good person that everybody wanted him to be. And a lot of fans are very invested in him being a good person and him like, because they've decided who they think this person is. And towards the end, you get to see this is not who this person is. This is a person who is absolutely in Persecutor Approach on the fucking regular and doing stuff that is really harmful and really toxic and really problematic and has literally cost people their lives, like literally cost people their lives. And I still see people online justifying the behavior. Oh, but this, and he didn't have a choice. And it's like, that's because we don't want to name, because we are invested in believing this person is a certain type of way. And this happens in our personal lives. I'm using this as an example because it's a little bit easier sometimes when it's a fictional situation. And yet people still get attached to it. It's like, yeah, this person's amazing. And like people being like, I wanted them to end up together. And it's like, you wanted this woman who has been through the most horrific things to end up with somebody who willingly chose to act in ways that cost people their lives on the regular and went against the thing that she wanted, like actually worked against her on the regular. Now, I'm not saying what's right or wrong here. What I'm saying is that when we are attached to seeing somebody in a certain way, whether that person is ourselves or whether that person is somebody else, it can be very, very difficult because seeing them in that certain way, it is fulfilling certain needs in us, even if that need is just emotional experience expression. I feel good when I see these two interact on screen, and I want to continue feeling good about them every time I see this person. And if I actually have to admit that this person is actually a toxic, abusive person, that will be Daz's dinner time. If you heard that in the background, that was the automatic cat feeder going off in the background. You're like, what the hell is that sound? That's what it is.
First dinner.
And so if we want to continue feeling good about this person when we see them, and if we have to name that this thing that they're doing is not okay, then we don't get to feel as good about it anymore. So it's going to compromise our needs. Now, if we find ways of meeting our needs that are not dependent on this other person and we get to feel good irrespective of how they're behaving, it's easier to name it.
I also want to say that, like, it's not just wanting to like see the good in people, it's also wanting the situation to be good, wanting to see the situations as, you know, and especially as we're talking about this specific example, like there was some sort of like there was a romanticizing of the whole thing, and hell, I got caught. I'm like, oh, are they gonna run away to get like all of these things? And I started watching The Handmaid's Tale after I knew all of this, like knew all of this. We're constantly learning and developing
the
this stuff.
We're talking.
Like, yeah, the needs stuff. Like, there was times I look and I'm like, oh, but that's the storyline, the will they, won't they, the romance, the, you know,
the drama,
in people's like the drama. Yeah. And even in people's like personal lives, like I've had a situation recently with a friend where they're going through something and me pointing out stuff. And it's like, well, no, but this isn't what it was supposed to look like. This is what it looks like. This is what the dream is. This is what the story is. This is how it's supposed to play out. And admitting or acknowledging that somebody is in that persecutor approach kind of blows up the entire storyline. So like,
yeah, it's
so I just want to remind people it's situational and personal.
Yeah, and I think that that's the part of the reason that so many people are allowing toxic behaviors in their relationships is because what we see portrayed on the screen as love or romantic is fueled with drama, because drama is the thing that makes the entertainment. Safe, secure, reliable intimacy and love and connection and relationships are not necessarily entertaining to watch. I don't think Handmaid's Tale would have made it through 6 seasons if everything was like, if there was no drama in it. Everyone would be like, in fact, I remember there was when in the UK, like we had I can't remember which season it was. We had when Big Brother first started in the UK. I think it was season 4. It was very early on, and the very first season there was a big drama because somebody was bringing in writing materials, and this person labeled Nasty Nick has been known about that for the rest of time in the UK because he dared to bring in writing materials and try and influence votes in Big Brother. But there was a season, I think it might have been the 4th season, where everyone got on really well and everybody said how boring it was, because that's not entertainment. And so we need to understand what is the difference between what is good entertainment and what is good in relationships. They're not the same thing. And because we romanticize these ideas, what's in movies, what's in TV show, it's when things fall apart and there are so many things to overcome and challenges and star-crossed lovers and somebody who walks away because of the trauma of their past and then realizes what they've got and yearns, blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's like things that are positioned as romantic are done so through the lens of a lot of drama and trauma in fiction, because the drama and is the thing that creates the entertainment for us. That doesn't make it what's good in relationships. And so often we're trying to replicate this feeling of like, oh goodness, wow, oh look, they've come close to the end and they nearly all died, but everything was fine. You don't want to get to the point where you nearly all die in order for things to feel good in your actual life. This is something that doesn't help you in life. It's only exciting in the context of fictional entertainment. And so it's important that we recognize that things that are good in fiction are not healthy and supportive when it comes to our relationship dynamics. So it's important to remember that all of the things that we've been talking about here are behaviors of the persecutor approach. And the persecutor approach is a behavior of the victim approach. The victim approach here is central. If you haven't listened to that episode, please go back and listen to it to understand how that is the root of all of these behaviors. Now, it's important for us to repeat. We said it at the beginning. We're going to say it again right now. Persecutor approach behaviors do not have to be intended to be real or to be harmful. So someone doesn't need to be meaning to do these things in order to be actually doing them. And it's important to also say at this point that sometimes these episodes, they may feel a little bit heavy, and it's important that for us to be able to understand these behaviors in order to be able to identify them in ourselves, and therefore to know how to shift them when we start to learn about the empowerment dynamic and the empowerment ecosystem. And so it may feel a little bit heavy right now. We have lots of other episodes that are lots more fun if you want to go and listen to another one before we actually get to the empowerment ecosystem, in case it's not available yet, but it is coming soon, I promise. And then finally, it's important for us to recognize that another behavior of the victim approach is to step into what's called the rescuer approach, to try to avoid being in the victim approach, because being in the rescue approach often feels better on the surface than being in the victim approach does. However, it is still a victim approach, and being in the rescue approach is often a way of masking and avoiding feeling the impact of being in the rescue approach. And we're going to get into the rescue approach in our next episode. So please come back for that, because the rescue approach is one of those like tricky little ones, because a lot of us are like, but being a rescuer is good, right? And it's like, not in this context, no. And a lot of people do it with good intention, and actually end up harming themselves and other people in the process. So it's really important to understand. So come back and listen to that next time. Anything else you want to share before we finish up?
Nope, good.
No. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening then. What I said, we'll be back again next week. Between now and then, remember to stay safe, take care of yourself, and continue to meet your own needs. Lots of love. Bye.
Bye, friends.
That's it for today.
If you like what you heard
and would like to see some of Serena's awesome facial expressions,
check out the video podcast on YouTube.
And remember, the behaviors of someone coming from a persecutor approach come from having chronically unmet needs, come from being a victim approach at core. The core feelings that someone in this position tends to feel is anxiety or anxiety related, and they tend to be focusing on their problems. But there is a better way, and we're going to get to it soon.
Well, shit. It really is that simple.